Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Mademoiselle Lynna, and you can find me online at www.scottishsunflower.com. Today, we are here for Folktale Friday. So, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Today's folktale is the story of the donkey's head. A poor woman who was walking down the road saw a donkey's head on the ground. It opened its mouth and said to her, "Granny, pick me up and you'll be rich." So she picked it up and brought it home with her, and every day thereafter she found a silver coin next to it. One day the donkey's head said to her, "I want you to ask the king to let me marry his daughter." "How can a king's daughter marry the head of a donkey?" asked the woman. "If I suggest it to the king, he'll have me killed." But the donkey's head insisted. It kept nagging her every day until she agreed. She asked for an audience with the king, and when it was granted, she told him what the donkey's head wanted. The king was so angry that he had given her 100 lashes. The old woman returned home grumbling and aching all over, and said to the donkey's head, "Just look at what you've done to me." The donkey's head was sorry and asked to be forgiven. Still, it clung to its obsession and kept begging her to speak to the king again, until finally she relented and did. Once more she was given 100 lashes and sent home in disgrace. And once more the donkey's head asked her forgiveness for causing her such pain and sorrow. Still, it kept pleading with her to go to the king a third time. In the end, she agreed and did so. The sight of her made the king so furious that he said, "You horrid old nag! How long will you make a laughing-stock of me?" The old woman implored him to hear her out, however, and when she was done speaking, he said, if only to get rid of her once and for all, "All right, I'll marry my daughter to the donkey's head, but on one condition, that it make me a gift of 500 camels bearing 500 chalices of gold, and of 500 serving maids carrying 500 baskets of wedding clothes made of the finest embroidery and silk. And I also want it to build me a palace larger and more beautiful than the one I have now." The old woman returned to the donkey's head and told it what the king had said. "I hope this puts an end to your foolishness," she said. "Not at all," replied the donkey's head. "Nothing could be easier." And at once it had the king brought 500 camels bearing 500 gold chalices, and 500 serving maids, and all the rest. And when the king saw that his demands had been met, and not a single thing was missing, he kept his word, and married his daughter to the donkey's head in a grand wedding. And so the princess lived with her husband in the new palace and was happy, for each night the donkey's head became a courtly, handsome young man who did not turn back into a head again until the morning. One day the princess's sister was married too. The princess was invited to the wedding and asked her husband's permission to attend. "You may go to your sister's wedding," he said, "but you must promise not to tell anyone that your husband is a donkey's head. Say only that you are happy and that your life with me is a good one." The king's daughter promised and set out for the wedding. She was embraced and received with great joy upon arriving, and the wedding itself was a fine one. During the banquet, all the old women kept asking her about her life, and whether all was as it should be, and at first she answered them without breaking her word. Yet in the end, they pried and pestered so much that she broke down and confessed that she was married to a donkey's head. At night, however, she told them, it turned into a perfectly normal human being. In fact, into quite a charming young man. "And what happens to the donkey's head then?" they asked. "It's nothing but an empty shell," she replied. "Well then," the old woman said to her, "why don't you take it and burn it? If your husband can't return to it, he'll have to remain a charming young man all the time." The princess was persuaded, and no sooner had her husband fallen asleep on the night of her return than she made a small fire and threw the empty shell of the donkey's head into it. Nothing was left of it but a handful of ashes. When her husband awoke in the morning, he saw that the head was gone. "Alas!" he cried, "where is my shell? Now I am in great danger." "Please forgive me," said his wife. "I only wanted you to be my charming young man all the time." However, this failed to reassure him. Indeed, so great was his fear that even when she offered to give him all her jewels, he remained unconsoled and soon vanished. So the princess was left without a husband, and as she was unable to bear her loneliness in the empty house, she took her belongings and returned to her parents' palace, where she sat crying and grieving all day long. "It's all your fault," she said to the old woman. "Why did you tell me to burn my husband's shell? Now I have neither shell nor man." Thus she sat weeping, neither eating nor drinking, but thinking of her husband all the time. And now let us leave the grief-stricken princess and see what happened. One day when a woman in town finished kneading some dough and sent her daughter to the baker's to make it into bread. As the girl was walking with the dough, a fierce wind came along and snatched it from her hands. She began to give chase until she came to a camel washing dishes. The girl was astounded by such an unusual sight and lingered to see what else the camel might do. When the camel gathered up the clean dishes and departed with them, the girl followed. They reached a house whose door the camel opened, and she entered after it. The camel, though, was not an ordinary beast, but a spirit, and on stepping into the house it called out, "Wind, rain, clean up at once." In no time the wind blew and the rain fell, and the two elements swept and scrubbed and polished the house until it was spotless. Next, a rug and 3 chairs descended from the ceiling in the way of furnishings, and then 3 men came down and sat on the chairs, after which a table set with delicacies appeared. The 3 men fell to eating and drinking their fill of good things, until one of them took a rosy apple from his pocket and cut it into 4 pieces. Taking one for himself and giving a piece to each of his companions, the 4th piece he set aside, saying, "This is for she who, while out of sight, is never out of mind. Though her jewels I refused when she offered me them." At once the walls of the house began to weep, as did the men, while the girl stood holding the camel by its tail and seeing everything. When the meal was over, the camel took the dishes and went outside to wash them. The girl followed it, still holding its tail, until they reached the place where she first saw it, from where she continued home. "Where have you been, and where is my dough?" shouted her mother. And when the girl told her what had happened, the woman sent her at once to the royal palace to inform the king's daughter, because she was sure that the man with the apple must be the princess's lost husband. So the girl went off to the palace, crying out when she arrived, "Stand back! Don't say a thing! I've come to cure the daughter of the king." "Who does this child think she is that we should let her in?" wondered the guards. Just then, though, the girl cried out again, "Stand back! That's an order! I have come to cure the king's daughter." And the king heard her from his room and said, "Let her in. Who knows? Maybe she really can heal my daughter's broken heart." The girl was led into the room of the princess, whom she found in a pitiful state, suffering from exhaustion and close to death. Stepping up to her, she whispered in her ear, "Your sorrows, O princess, will soon be gone once you see your husband again. And," she added, "if you sit up and eat something, I'll take you to him. For without the strength to endure, even salvation can come too late." Then the girl stepped out into the hallway and told the servants, "Bring me some chicken soup." Quickly a chicken was slaughtered and soup was prepared, and once the princess had eaten it, she felt much better. The king came to her room, rejoiced in the sight of her, and ordered the girl to be given a bag of silver, so that she returned home considerably richer than she had left it. The next day the girl came back to the palace and told the princess, "Come with me." The princess asked her father's permission, and he granted it. So she followed the girl to the place where the camel stood washing dishes. They began to speak with it, and the princess saw that the girl had told her the truth. Then the two of them took hold of the camel's tail and followed it. The camel came to the house, opened the door, and entered, and the girl and the princess entered after it. Again it summoned the wind and the rain to clean up, and again they did. Then the rug descended from the ceiling with the 3 chairs, one of silver, one of gold, and one of diamonds. The camel hid the princess and the girl underneath them just as the table came down with its white cloth and dishes of good things. And then the 3 men appeared and began to dine. When they had eaten their fill, the man seated on the chair of diamonds took an apple from his pocket, reached for a knife, and cut the apple into 4 equal pieces. "This 4th piece," he said, "is for she who, while out of sight, is never out of mind, though her jewels I refused when she offered me them. Alas, she, my love, is far from me now. Oh, weep for me, ye walls of the house." Then the walls began to weep, and all present wept too, the man with the apple also, until, from beneath the chair, someone laughed. The man with the apple was angered and lifted the chair, and whom do you think he saw? She who was never out of mind was now not out of sight either. "It's because of you that I suffered all this," he said. "Your suffering," she replied, "was nothing compared to mine. Because of you I fell ill, and had it not been for this girl who saved me from death by bringing me here, you would never have seen me again." The prince, for that is what he was, embraced his wife and kissed her. Then the two returned to the palace, where a new wedding was held for them, even grander than the first. As for the girl, she was wed to the prince's younger brother, and they all lived happily ever after. I hope that you have enjoyed today's folk tale. If you did enjoy it and you feel others will as well, please feel free to share this video. And don't forget, comment, like, and subscribe to my channel. I will see you guys back here next week. Love you bunches. Bye-bye.